So this next one, some sad news. Phillip E. Johnson, influential proponent of intelligent design and author of Darwin on Trial, dies at the age of 79. So a lot of people are probably familiar with him. He was a lawyer, I believe, who wrote about this whole issue of Darwinism in a very popular book, and has been a very outspoken proponent of that. And you've read his book, Darwin on Trial.
I've read his book, and I've met him actually several times. And so he was a lawyer who basically decided to look at the creation evolution issue from a lawyer perspective. So he wants to look, well, what's the evidence for it? Is the evidence any good? So he went at it from a very evidential standpoint, and he said, this doesn't work. His book was called Darwin on Trial, and he found him basically guilty of not being, not telling the truth, or not, the evidence not supporting what Darwin said and what Darwin believed. And so anyway, so he's kind of known as the father of what's called the intelligent design movement. And now that's not to be confused with biblical creation, because with those in the intelligent design movement, they may or may not be Christians, and they have what they call sort of a big tent approach. So they welcome anyone who wants to come in, who wants to challenge Darwinian evolution, okay? So they don't deal with the age of the earth. They don't deal with the age of the universe. Many of them within the movement do believe the earth is billions of years old, the universe is billions of years old, the evolution is true, okay? That we still have a common ancestor with the apes and all that, but they just don't believe it's totally unguided, or that it just came about by random chance. They would say God had some God had intelligent designer, had a role in it, okay, is what they say, basically. So we have to be a little careful, and we'll put a resource there, a link to talk a little bit more about that particular movement. The basic idea is they're trying to say, is something design? And so they look at a lot of things in biology, like the ability of our blood to clot. It's very complex, right? So they would call that irreducible complexity, and they would say it's so complex that it can't have come about by random chance. There has to be a designer, and I would agree. Creationists use these types of arguments, but it's not an ultimate argument,
right?
And you brought up that point earlier about the fall.
Yeah, because if you just there's a creator, and then you look at the world around us. Well, the creation is clearly like there's death, there's suffering, there's all these horrible things in this creation. So what kind of a creator is it that made this horrible creation that's got some beauty but so much ugliness? So you need the biblical framework to explain that. You need it to understand that God created everything very good. Our sin broke God's very good creation, and now we live on a planet that's groaning because of sin, as Romans tells us. So, and that's why we need Jesus Christ. So you need to have the biblical framework in order to properly understand the world around us. It isn't enough to just say there's a creator. I mean, Romans 1 says it's obvious there's a creator.
Obvious.
That's very true. But God has given us his word so that we can properly look at the world around us and properly understand that and be pointed to Christ. Because ultimately, someone believing in creator, well, what does that really accomplish, right? It's Jesus Christ we want to be pointing people to, and his death on the cross, so people can accept the gospel and be radically transformed by
It doesn't go far
so
enough.
It doesn't go far enough.
It goes a little bit, but it does, and it can be useful. I'm not arguing that, but we just have to be careful with it.
Got to definitely go farther than just saying there's a creator.
Okay.
All right, this next one. Ancient ape offers clues to evolution of two-legged walking. So last week, the news
Not
was...
really, but we'll get to that.
The news was all abuzz with this new missing link they found and all these headlines, missing link, missing link. So we were like, okay, well, this is really popular. We got to talk about this on Answers News. And then we started looking into it, and we're like, well, the headlines might be just a little tiny bit of an overstatement.
I was so unimpressed when I read the article because you see the headlines, right? And then you start actually reading the article, and you're like, wait a minute. They really, I concluded they really have no clue. They really don't know. And I'm not joking on this.
Right.
Because,
So what they found was what they believed to be 4 individuals as a specific ape species, a newly discovered one. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation here, but Denuvius guggenosi?
That works for me. Yeah,
something like that.
Sounds pretty close.
And they only found a very small collection, as is typical, a very small collection of fossils, a couple of vertebrae, a couple leg bones, a couple hand bones. And from this, they conclude, okay, this is an extinct ape species. It lived in trees. It swung through the trees. But the vertebra might suggest that possibly it had a long, flexible back, even though they only have 2 vertebrae. So maybe that means that it was able to be bipedal and was able to walk around on 2 legs. So it's supposed to be 11 million years old. But humans and chimps didn't diverge till 6 to 7 million years ago. So just bipedalism much older than we thought. Did it evolve more than once?
That's the thing. They never expected to see bipedalism in apes that are that ancient. Okay, they thought it evolved a lot later, more when we got to hominids, because that's one of the things that really defines kind of human and differentiates them from the apes is the fact that they're bipedal. And so now they're like, wait a minute, maybe we need to rethink this. And I thought, this is just another case of the changing evolutionary story that we see over and over and over again. Like literally every week. We have 2 articles in this particular one that are like this. This is the first one where they're changing, like, oh, maybe we need to rethink how that how humans are defined, if they're defined like that, or hominids, and where does this fit on the tree. But one of my favorite parts of this was, so they're trying to explain, though, because the arms in it appear to be gripping types of arms, that they would need for going
like
around
apes
in the
do,
trees.
swinging around in trees too.
Right. So then how do you explain bipedalism with that? Because if they're going around in the trees,
Why are they bipedal?
what is the purpose of walking, right?
Right.
So they said, not joking, they made up this term, extended limb clambering. Okay, so whatever that is, apparently
that was a new one.
they're
to
like
us. We hadn't
standing
heard
up
that
on the
one.
limbs and walking around with their arms still, I don't know. Again, it's
that was a
totally
new
new
one.
term, so who knows what that is.
So we have a more thorough analysis of this coming out, Ken's blog today. Dr. David Menton, who's an anatomist here on staff with us, he read through this and read through the scientific paper and wrote up a little bit of an analysis on that. So you can check that out when the blog comes out in a couple of hours on the answersingenesis.org website to see what he has to say about it. But he basically said the same thing. There's they're making
not
a
enough
lot out
evidence.
of not really a lot.
And it's not a problem from a creation perspective if there were some apes that were bipedal. That's okay. I mean, it's not a problem that God made maybe some apes that walked upright, potentially. Again, we don't have evidence of that by this paper, but it wouldn't be a problem if he did. I mean,
He created all kinds of different designs.
So it's not a big deal. I mean, kangaroos, they hop around on 2. I mean, it's not like it's something that's just unique to humans, really. And so it's not an issue if he did, but it's certainly not it's certainly not in the process of becoming a human being, because those are separate kinds created
and
by
it's not
God.
just us who are saying that the evidence is limited. If you read through the article, there's at least 2 paleoanthropologists in here who are like, and they hold to evolutionary ideas, but they're like, this is maybe a bit of an overstatement based on the very small sample that they have in these couple of bones. So they're not everyone is convinced by this new
scarcity
find.
of evidence.
Yeah.
To indicate that.
They don't have the pelvis. They don't have any of the bones that are really important for figuring that out.
Somebody said, call me when the ape can pedal a bicycle. So, yeah. So just because you can walk upright too doesn't mean that thing is a human being.
Certainly not.
So,
yes.
yeah.
All right. This next one is a sad one showing inconsistency of our culture. California woman charged with murder after her unborn baby dies from her meth use. So it's a really sad story about a lady in California who was informed multiple times about the risks of taking methamphetamines when she's pregnant. Not a good thing to do. And unfortunately, she took so much methamphetamine during her pregnancy that her baby was actually stillborn. So the police are searching for her because they have a warrant for her arrest for murder because she was told this will kill your baby and she did it anyway. I agree.
I agree.
She knew
She
what
should be
she was
charged with
doing.
murder.
She killed her child because of this. But the inconsistency of our culture, where she could have walked into a Planned Parenthood clinic and just used different drugs to have her baby die of cardiac arrest and then been removed from her womb.
It's totally so inconsistent. Yeah, that's what we like to point out with these kinds of things is the baby in the womb is either a human being whose life should be protected or it's not. Okay, you can't have it both ways. I mean, it either is or it isn't. And yet these cases show over and over again that again, they don't know. I mean, I think they just
in certain circumstances they're willing to treat the baby as a human being with rights, and then other times they're like, oh no, it doesn't matter. You should, in California, state
and we'll
schools
see if this
now have
sticks.
to give free abortion
I'm not
pills and
convinced
stuff.
this will stick as a murder charge.
No.
They'll come up with some reason why it's not, and my guess is they'll come up with a reason of I mean, again, to be consistent, the unborn baby then is not a baby, and it's okay that it died. It's not. Because it's not a baby until it comes out, or it's not a life to be protected until it's born, or something like that. So.
Yeah, but in a biblical worldview, we're able to say categorically that a baby, no matter the age, whether we're talking about an egg that was just fertilized, you're at the very moment of fertilization, or you're talking about a baby that's minutes from delivery, there's no difference. It's still a human being made in the image of God who deserves to be protected and cared for. And we're actually having a new exhibit coming to the Creation Museum that's going to talk all about that.
It'll open up next year.
Which is, I'm so excited for this exhibit, the Fearfully Fearfully and Wonderfully Made exhibit.
Yeah.
It's going to have 3D models of babies as in the womb as they grow, so that you can kind of see that, and it's going to be so neat. I'm so excited.
It's really going to be
Babies
neat.
are precious to my heart. Be it clearly this one. So
Number 3
right here.
is on the
So
way.
I love seeing these different exhibits and things that are going to help other people recognize the preciousness of unborn life.
Definitely.
All right, so speaking of changing everything we ever knew about everything, this next article from New Scientist, Cosmological Crisis. We don't know if the universe is round or flat. So
I never even knew that. I guess I never thought about whether the universe was round or flat. So,
but apparently other people have thought a lot about it.
Yeah.
Probably Danny on our staff has.
Yeah, I'm sure.
He's an astronomer, and so he's probably thought about it. But so I guess the generally accepted idea is that the universe is flat, like a sheet. But these new findings from the Planck Space Observatory, these new measurements, suggest maybe that the universe is actually shaped like a sphere instead of a flat sheet, and that would change absolutely everything we know about the shape of the universe.
And the reason they think it's flat to begin with is based on the Big Bang and the inflation model that help explain the Big Bang. So that's what it was predicated on, that to begin with, as to why it's a flat sheet. And then they get these other measurements that say it seems to indicate that it's a sphere. And so, like she said, if that's true, then again, what happens to their model, right? Well, it's problematic because all the evidence isn't aligning and supporting the same model. So then what do you do? And they did say, though, that I had to laugh. They said, well, it could just be a statistical fluke. So they said, we really need to get, once again, we need to get more evidence, and we need to really look at this. And there's some new observatory that's being built that will help them get better data to really look at this and determine if it's a fluke or not a fluke.
But it was interesting what they said here was, if nothing is in agreement, we have to think hard about our model of the universe and its formation. And I would argue, yeah, you do, but it isn't necessarily the way that you think. You have to rethink it.
I could solve it for them really easily.
When you get rid of the Big Bang and you get rid of inflation and all that stuff that's been arbitrarily constructed to try and naturalistically explain the universe, you're going to have a lot easier time because you're just going to be looking at the actual data and not trying to fit it into your particular model of how the universe came about. It's like we know God created everything from the very beginning, and so we start from that starting point and not from the Big Bang and inflation and all this other stuff that they have to try and use because they have to somehow explain everything naturalistically. So it'll be interesting to see when they get those new measurements.
And from a creation perspective, I mean, I haven't talked to Dr. Faulkner specifically about this article, but I don't think it matters whether it's a sheet or a sphere. It's not necessarily a for or against, but somebody on here said, how could our universe be a flat sheet? I have no idea, okay? Because I'm not an astronomer. So, but that's something, again, that's supposedly supported by the models, but no, it may not be. So once again, somebody said, oh, with money pouring into studies like this, the world will be flat. So, kind of a pun there. So,
Calvin Smith, the director of AIG Canada, is on the Answers in Genesis page, and he said, "Looking forward to seeing you next week at the Gospel Reset Mega Conference in Niagara Falls. You'll be in my home country for a little while." So.
And yes, Avery is pregnant again. So they're having this conversation on here. Somebody said, you already had your baby. And then somebody said, wait a minute, I think she's pregnant again. And yes,
different baby.
Again,
did have my other baby. Yeah, we're on to baby number 3.
Yep.
So in February 22nd. So my goal is to hit the leap day because it's a leap year next year. I'm going for February 29th. That's my goal. So we'll see.
Okay.
All right. From Science News, a toe bone hints that Neanderthals used eagle talons as jewelry. So this is talking about a eagle talon, a couple of eagle talons that were found in a cave on Spain's Mediterranean coast that they believe belonged to probably the Neanderthal population that was in the area. And they found little stone tool incisions on it. So they believe that these talons were specifically cut off and shaped to be used potentially as jewelry or something like that, because they didn't find any evidence of fires or anything to be cooking the eagles, so they're thinking maybe they're just using it for ornamental purposes.
And whenever I read articles like this, I think it just shows again, Neanderthals are people too, okay? There's not a problem with these people being fully human, completely human. We have tons of archaeological evidence to indicate that. We have tons of genetic evidence to indicate that. They're just a little different anatomically than we are. And there's other populations too, like denosivans that they found, that they're just from an anatomical standpoint, they're a little different, but it doesn't mean they're not human, right?
Yeah,
it's just
still
variety
fully
within
human.
humans that for whatever reason doesn't exist in so much today, but did at one point in the past. They're probably post-flood populations shortly after the flood that then for whatever reason aren't around anymore. But we still see some of their characteristics showing. We've done articles on saying you have a little bit of Neanderthal in you. If you do some of those genetic testing things, they'll tell you how much Neanderthal you have. It compares to the Neanderthal DNA. You have some of the same variety or some of the same variations that they have.
Because they're fully human, just
yeah,
like we
they're
are,
fully
made in God's
human.
image,
Yeah.
descended from Adam and Eve.
Yep.
So yeah, so no big shock that they wore jewelry. We wear jewelry today.
Yeah.
We like to create beautiful things. All right, we're actually going to get through all.
We're gonna
our
get through all the
news.
articles.
This is what
That,
happens
like,
when
never
the guys aren't on the show.
We knew it.
We had to get to this one because I picked this one just for Georgia because I knew she'd like it. So this
Yep.
one also from New Scientist. Parasites are going extinct in droves, and we should be very worried. So take a look at those beautiful parasites on the
awesome.
screen
Okay.
there, and you'll look at them and definitely want to save them.
Yeah.
But this whole article is talking about how conservation really hasn't looked at parasites. Like, who cares about parasites, right? Just get rid of them. If they talk
They're causing problems.
yeah, just you get your different organism, whatever it is. They talk about condors, Californian condors at the beginning. Just get rid of all the parasites on them so they're healthy. And they didn't realize, actually, by getting rid of the parasites, you might not be helping the environment, actually.
Well, it's the same idea, when we take antibiotics, and it is good to take antibiotics for certain bacterial infections and stuff, and that's warranted. But, at the same time, it kills off a lot of the good bacteria that you have, which is most of what you have. And so it can create problems. And so for years and years, creationists have asked this question about parasites because, again, our world, and that's what they talk about in this article, has traditionally thought of them being all being bad and all being
all you ever hear about
problematic.
parasites, right?
Right. So we never have thought of them in a good light. But even more and more that research we've done on viruses have shown that there are beneficial viruses. And so I'm not surprised that there are also beneficial parasites. Parasites are really hard to explain from an evolutionary standpoint because they have extremely complex life cycles with multiple hosts. It's one of the most complex things you'll study when you take microbiology. Okay. So it's hard to explain, but from a creation standpoint, we look at those and say it's designed that way. And before the fall, it was probably doing something very, very good. It may still be doing something very, very good.
We just don't fully understand it.
We just don't either fully understand it. And sometimes it's gone bad, okay, which leads to problems. We're not saying people shouldn't, kill parasites if they're causing an infection, and like malaria is caused by a parasite. So obviously there can be some bad things that happen in a post-fall world. But I think it is interesting. One of the things they brought out is they may be keeping other populations in check, other like bacterial populations or parasite populations, and
which in a post-fall world is very important.
Right. This is something true of bacteria as well. They're training the immune system to kind of what to look for, and so that the immune system doesn't overreact, because that's what leads to a lot of allergies and asthma and things like that. I always say, people, let your kids eat some dirt. It's okay. All right. Don't be so hyper clean, and all the kids are like, woohoo, right? It's good to have some of those things.
My kids love eating dirt. So.
Right, because it helps your immune system to differentiate, and so that's a good thing. And so we need to not be so like super duper clean about everything, within reason. I mean, you have raw chicken, you're gonna wash your hands, you're gonna, take proper precautions. But just this whole what they call the hygiene hypothesis is we're too clean, and so the good things aren't
all the time.
The good things aren't allowed to do their job, and so to help us with the bad stuff, basically.
Yeah, so it's just a super interesting article about something we often don't think about, and that conservationists are now starting to have to think about. Like, if you, some of these parasites are so species specific, they only live on one species. So if you get rid of all the parasites, that species doesn't have something that was there before, and it can potentially cause some problems.
Right.
So just really interesting research, and probably pointing back to something that was very good before, has been marred by
and
sin.
Still may be very good.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes they get in the wrong place or the wrong host, and then they create problems. But in their natural host, they're fine. So they said what we need are more children's books about parasites, the good parasites, stuffed parasites. You actually can buy those online. But so it's good. It's exciting to see how this totally world that we cannot see, that God has created, still has these remnants of being very good. And we're just now beginning to figure this out. And so it's just amazing. So We will be back on Monday with a whole new set of articles.
Yes, a
for
whole
everyone
new
to
set, 'cause we
join.
got through
yeah,
all
a whole
them.
new set on Monday. So we will see you then.
Thank you.